Hey everyone, it's Kel with Women for One, and I'm really excited to be here today to be speaking with a new colleague of mine, friend, incredible, as we were talking before this, Ash, influencer, Ash Beckham. And welcome, Ash. Excited
Hey,
to talk to you.
yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, so Ash and I met when she lives in Boulder, and I came into Boulder to do a speech workshop where she was an expert at and talking to us through a mutual friend of ours who we both really respect and adore, Erin Weed. And I personally was completely blown away by Ash because of her authenticity and her groundedness and her empathy for humanity and for her humor. And all of that mixed together is very refreshing in the speaker's world for me. And I also really resonate with the idea that she spoke about in her TED Talk that we're going to talk about today around having hard conversations, speaking truth, really getting those secrets that you've been keeping out for yourself and for others. And I know she's also spoke at Ignite as well. So I'm really looking forward to having this conversation, which I don't think will be a hard conversation, but actually talking about the hard conversations in life. So thank you for talking with us.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. So can you tell us first what brought you, through this journey to where you are, where you're speaking right now and talking about these important topics for women and men throughout the world?
Well, I feel like it wasn't, I kind of consider myself an accidental advocate. Like that's not what I was, it's not what I was planning on doing. It was just kind of the world that I was living in Boulder. And I was at a point in my life where I kind of wanted to do something creative, and Ignite was a really easy kind of springboard for that. Non-professional speakers, you have 5 minutes exactly, 20 slides, they auto advance every 15 seconds. Like it's a pretty regimented routine. And that seems like a good way. And I went to go see a guy in December of 2012 who did his talk. And he was so compelling. He talked about his ups and downs with weight loss. And like men never do that. Nobody in Boulder does that. This guy was just so real and authentic and honest and just like putting it out there. I was so inspired, and that emotion he evoked in me, I wanted to do that same thing. And so, not really knowing what to talk about. And Boulder's a progressive place. So, the conversation about marriage equality, wasn't really anything that I felt needed to be spoken about. But at the same time, to think that just because we have a judicial decision on something or even some legislation means that discrimination is over is, a pretty naive perspective.
Right.
So, I kind of delved into not using the word gay in a negative way. And knowing that still happens in high schools and locker rooms and in workplaces too. And how do we kind of change that? So that was kind of the beginning of it. And then I was lucky enough that it got some traction online. And when I reached out to the TEDx folks, they were, really, really kind and supportive in kind of developing it to the next step. So that was it. And then, the ways of the internet, it just kind of did its own thing.
Right, right. So your TED Talk, and I want to read the title, We're All Hiding Something, Let's Find the Courage to Open Up, really moved me for a lot of reasons. First of all, I've seen a lot of TED Talks, and they seem to be sometimes a little too scientific, and because they require like some kind of facts. And
Yeah.
I think what moved me about you and yours was you just made yourself so real and approachable and empathetic to people that are afraid of differences, and really explaining both of those things where, there's a lot of people that have been raised to be afraid of people that are gay, afraid of anything that's different. And what I loved about that was really that focus on empathy in it,
Mhm.
and the difference between tolerance and acceptance that you spoke about. And so can you tell our community a little bit about the TED Talk? And if you haven't watched it, you have to watch it after Ash talks.
Yeah, it was, the basic premise is that we all have closets, and, the LGBTQ community has kind of cornered the market on the title closet. But when we think about it, I wanted to explain to people, like, what does it feel like to tell your parents you're gay? And I have, friends, even straight, people that know me that are very supportive, that are like, I would never know what that would feel like. And I think you go back to this kind of somatic feeling in the pit of your stomach, and we all share that. Like the scariest thing that you've ever done that feels the same as the scariest thing that I've ever done. And I kind of compare it to like jumping off of a diving board. You know, it doesn't matter if it's like the edge of the pool or a 30-meter board. You're just standing there looking over the edge, and that feeling of like, oh my gosh, should I jump, is the same. The height doesn't really matter. And if we can start to relate on that level of those similar feelings, then we can begin to understand each other a little bit better. You know, I don't know what it feels like to do a lot of things, but if people can kind of compare it in that way, you know, I don't know what it's like to tell somebody I want a divorce. I don't know what it's like to, you know, tell my family I had a miscarriage. I don't know what any of those things feel like, but I can imagine they feel the same, because there's this part of this generality of we're sharing something with other people that we're afraid to do because we think it's going to change how they think of us and how they see us. The topic is really widgets, and that's not to demean anybody else's experience, for sure. And we can get to the point of like what's harder, what's not, but why not start at the point of what's similar and what we can kind of identify with, and then something I've never struggled with, I can understand a little bit better because it feels like something I've been through. And that's kind of the concept of that closet. And to me, it was like, it doesn't matter what the inside of the closet looks like. What's keeping you in there, that doesn't matter. It's that feeling of being in there that we can all relate to.
I completely agree. And if you talk about the closet, yeah, the hard conversation is the interactional piece. I'm curious what your feelings are about, you know, what benefits you received and you see people receiving every day from, like at Women for One, sharing their story, sharing their experience with themselves first. Like I hid my sexual abuse from myself till I was 32. Like I forgot it as a survival skill. So I'm just curious what you think of that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I think that we all do that. And there's the anxiety of you know, whenever I speak, I'm like, the hardest thing I've ever done is come out to my parents. And then actually I was like, that's actually not true. The hardest thing I've ever done is come out to myself. Hands down. And then externally, the hardest thing I ever did was tell my parents. So that being the case, I think there's something very empowering about claiming your truth, whatever that is. And when you can speak about it, that it kind of, you know, smothers the shame flame, for lack of a better word. You know what I mean? Like there are things that ignite that, and there are things that put that out. And I think sharing your story, that, as you know, this one thing does not define me. It is unequivocally a part of who I am, no question. You cannot separate it from me, but it is not all of me. And so I think that's kind of the internal thing that we get from putting our story out there. Secondly, externally, you know, you'll hear some people say, "Oh, me too." You know, it's like the most empowering thing you can hear, the most, I guess, comforting thing you can hear when you start to share your story is have somebody say, "Oh, that happened to me too,"
so
and then you're not alone. There's,
right?
Totally. I mean, everybody. You could be in. There could be 10 people in 10 closets right next to each other, but if you're not talking to each other, you don't know. So I think that's kind of the second piece of it is knowing that you're not the only person that it's happened to. You know, are your circumstances very individual? Absolutely.
Yes.
But it's happened to somebody else. And then thirdly is, you know, if we do kind of the closet metaphor with it, that you're speaking to the people that are still behind that door. There's something about hearing somebody else share their story that makes you want to come out, or makes you kind of peek your head out, or do something, because there's so many people that for wherever they are on their journey can't share their stories and can't come out, but they get that feeling of I'm not alone without having to disclose themselves. So, and to me, it kind of needs to happen in that order. You know, it's kind of that self-empowerment and then that kind of unity. You can't do it just to make other people feel better. You're like skipping the steps.
Right.
You know what I mean? You have to do it for yourself first for it to be genuine and kind of work through your own stuff around it. You know, like even after I did that first talk, and I say in the first 6 seconds, "Hi, my name is Ash and I am so gay," I really had a hard time going in, and I've been out for 2 decades. It was to go into places, high schools, any of these places that were bringing me in, knowing very well what I talked about, for me to say I'm a lesbian was still really hard to do. Not, but you know, because not that it was, I was ashamed of it, that I just didn't feel like I had to say it, but you didn't want it to define you. You don't want it to come with all the stereotypes or preconceived notions that people have with that.
Right.
That I am different or broken in some way or whatever that might be. And so we become very hesitant. So you have to be really, you know, when you're sharing your story, You got to be I mean, I
Pretty
told it to
solid.
the mirror a lot of times before I said it out loud.
Yeah, because you got to be solid. I mean, it's making me think of what's going on in the world right now around Muslims and in our country, which I don't want to make some big political statement, but just the fact that our country, a lot of the governors are acting out of fear from that place
Right.
of judging a stereotype and not letting refugees in instead of like empathy and understanding and just, it's all about fear to me, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And that, you don't, I remember when I first came out to my parents, and I feel like this goes across so many things. Of course, my experiences are LGBTQ, and that's kind of the need to be able to continue the conversations, but have them relate across the board is to see how they're similar to other experiences. And I told my parents, I don't want you to think different. I don't want they were worried about telling their friends. Understandably, they had to come out too, and they didn't want to, what were they going to say? What were they going to think? What were they going to think of their parenting? What were they going to think of me? There's all this
Right.
judgment wrapped up in it. And I said, I don't want your friends to think differently of me because I'm gay. I'm still the kid that went over to sleepovers. I played on the basketball team. Like, I'm the same kid.
I'm
I
a
want
good
them to
person.
think,
I'm just me. Yeah.
I want them to think differently of gay people because now they know one. And did it change their votes or do they still watch Fox News? Yeah, probably. But now there's there's this we-ness about it. If you're talking about marriage equality, you're talking about Ash. It's not like
Right.
or San Francisco or these things that just kind of happen or how it's portrayed in the media or, how you think gay people are. Like all of a sudden it's me. I remember being at my sister's wedding and so many people, back in Ohio and this was 15 years ago, but back in Ohio and so many people, you could like see the wheels turning because they were thinking, I mean, they'd known Mandy and I for years and to sit there and think Mandy can get married and Ash can't. There is something
Right.
wrong there. And for the 500 people in the room, probably 450 of them hadn't even thought about that before. But then all of a sudden they were like, well, that doesn't really make sense. And you're like, yeah, it doesn't make sense. But until you know somebody, until in the same way
Right.
of coming out of any closet, until you know somebody who's affected by it, there's no relatability. So I guess, responsibility of coming out when you're to the point of sharing your stories is that now people know it's a direct relation. It's not like, oh, my high school best friend is gay, or my college roommate was gay, or my sister's gay, or, anything else. My best friend growing up suffered from sexual abuse, whatever it is, whatever the stigma that's attached to it. Now it's like, oh, that's something that was experienced by my coworker, or my kid's pediatrician is gay, or, you know what I mean? It's
Right.
like this, the Harvey Milk said, come out wherever you are. And that was like this need of like, we need to, so people know it isn't scary.
Yeah, and I mean, the way I look at it, I have 6 children, ages 15 to 21, 3 of my own, 3 stepkids, and they're all 3 in high school, 3 in college. They look at people that are gay very even differently than I was brought up. It's there is progress, a lot of progress in it.
Oh,
Like,
for
I mean,
sure.
at high school, like my daughters and sons are friends with a lot of gay people that are
Oh, yeah,
out, but we also live in Seattle and Boulder.
totally.
And
For
I think there's a lot
sure.
of places in the country going back to that coming out of the closet in any way. It makes the society makes it a little easier when you're more educated, informed, and aware. Much
Yeah,
more
absolutely.
challenging in other areas of the country.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think that's, but there's this, to me, the battles that are happening now over, discrimination, LGBTQ discrimination, like they're not happening in Seattle. They're not happening in Boulder. They're not happening, in the East Village. They're happening in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Toledo, Ohio, and
Hmm.
Columbus, Ohio, places that I know because people have decided I want to stay and be part of my family. Like I got out of Ohio for to figure out myself anonymously. That is just the truth. That's why I left. And I have friends that stayed, and the bravery and the dedication to family is so inspiring to me. Of
Mm.
like changing lives and changing minds. Like that is where the battles are taking place. And when we live in progressive places, sometimes we forget that that's still happening. And you kind of
Yes,
think, why would you stay there? But then you see your friends who are
it's
with their nieces and nephews
and their families.
and they're putting roots down and growing families there, and that's where it changes because all of a sudden your neighbors that are awesome are lesbians, and then you have to figure it out. And are you going to not let your kids play with them? And are you going to explain to your kids why? It just that courage to me is truly not something I didn't have, and my friends that have done it, and to fight that fight because it seemed so uphill. And certainly when I left Ohio, it seemed like it was. And like, that is where change is happening.
Right. It's the courage to stay and build in the places that are still majorly discriminating and think it's just odd and feel so unsafe and are fear-based.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. It's that personalization of the cause, those one-on-one interactions, like that's where change comes from.
Yeah, and I love that you say that. And you talk about it in the talk, and I wanted to go into the 3 rules because it really is what moved me about the talk. And just to talk a little bit about it. So you say be authentic, be direct, and be unapologetic. And you do it humorously in the talk. I love that because sometimes you have to rip the Band-Aid off, right? You really have to,
Yeah,
you know, when
absolutely.
you're sharing something and having that hard conversation, no matter what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, there's this part of that we think we're softening it for the person we're coming out to, and sometimes it's your grandparents or whatever, and you feel like you need to do that. But when you look at it, there's a component of it that's really controlling. Like you want to control the outcome. You want to ease it in. There's all these little things that you want to do so you can maintain control of the situation when sometimes you just need to let it fly. Because if you're not disclosing the whole truth, then you're continuing to lie to these people. And for me, I mean, that's what I did. I was lying to everybody I knew because I was so worried about it. And that, any kind of softening of the blow, obviously it's everybody's decision, but I think we really need to look at it as like, am I copping out? Like, should I just rip it off? Is that the better way to handle it? Because we don't have faith in people, and to think that they're just going to respond immediately how we expect, I don't think is fair either. Like, we've taken years to come to the point of being able to tell this story. And to expect that somebody who's seen us in one way is just automatically going to be like, oh, okay, you're going to be a lesbian now and fine with it? Like, yeah, maybe that happens, but like, let's give them some time. I mean, we've had, years, they've had seconds. Like, let's give people a little bit of a break to work through. And of course, there's always timelines on that. But, you got to let people digest something like that to a certain extent. And that doesn't mean they don't love you or that they can't handle it or whatever. But like, these are some pretty heavy things we're bringing up, and you're changing. I mean, regardless, you're changing the way that people see you. Their frame of reference for you has completely shifted, and people can roll with that. But that it's almost disingenuous if it's instant. I
think that's a really good point. I mean, I can apply it to when I kind of came out about my sexual abuse that I had a lot of shame about because it was with my dad, and he passed, but I was very impatient and I was very angry remembering it. And I think about it now, I'm still healing that with some people that actually held some of his discretions from me that I asked because I'm angry. And just to expect them to just kind of, oh, now? Oh, I didn't know that. Just to expect them to go, okay, that's not human, actually. I mean, we wouldn't expect it from ourselves. So
totally. And we have this, like, we put so much pressure on ourselves to have these 15-second sound bites that change somebody's perspective on something that's so monumental. And it's just unrealistic. Like, we have to be willing to have the conversation, and it has to be a conversation, not a lecture. Like, we're coming out and we're saying what we have to say, but if we really care about those people and those interactions, there has to be a back and forth, and that's where it gets awkward and uncomfortable. And we have to be, gracious with people, and we can trust our gut that they're trying. And when we feel like that is stopped, then we kind of move forward or move away from that. But I think there's just something to be said for giving people permission to not be, exactly politically correct, because it's so kind of elitist and self-involved to think that people would know what we've been through when we haven't shared it with them. I mean, it's just, when you break it down into actual human relationships,
right?
It's our expectations of how it should be done is just unrealistic because we're dealing, like you said, we're dealing with humans.
Right.
Have their own stuff about all of the stuff.
And our own stuff. I mean, I think about it. My parents were like hippies and brought me up to accept everyone, blah, blah, blah. Oh, right. But then I accepted like every gay person I met. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I'm just as discriminatory as, as a person that rejects them because I'm like, oh, you're cool, you're gay.
Right.
No, actually, there's a lot of gay people I don't like their personality. I just don't like them. They're human beings. So it took me a while even to own that piece of it.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
Yeah, and like, am I homophobic if I'm not friends with somebody that's gay? And you're like, not if they're a jerk.
That's right.
I'm friends with jerks. Like, that's my bar. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me the rest of it. So,
Yeah.
but everybody has to be really self-reflective on that and on what's important to you and where you draw the line. And again, none of us are going to be perfect. We're going to say something dumb. We're going to act differently. We're going to have, whatever, homophobic, racist, xenophobic thoughts. Like,
right.
It just exists. It's the acknowledgement of it. And how do we change that? Like, that is where that is where that change comes from. Is this expectation of perfection just leads to a lack of involvement. We don't engage because we don't want to embarrass ourselves by not knowing, every HRC approved or the 56 genders on Facebook. Like, you're not going to know that there's 56. Do you have to know about all of them? Have a conversation with somebody about it. But to then remove yourself because we're so worried that we're not going to be progressive enough, or we're not going to be supportive enough, not going to be enough of an ally, that we just don't say anything. Like, I did it about race, like a year ago. I went into this. I was the speaker at a MLK event, and and there were some faculty and staff that were like, "Why do we have a white lesbian doing the keynote?" And you're like, "Fair, totally fair."
That makes sense.
And
yeah.
Totally. And I was like, all right, well, there's this message of unity or whatever. I said my thing and it resonated and people were great, but that was their initial reaction. But I know that if I was going to get into and I say, I'm an open book. Ask me anything. Ask me anything about being gay. I'll tell anybody anything they want to know if I trust their intent of just expanding their knowledge about anything.
Curiosity.
Totally.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm like, it's not that hard. Just ask me anything. And then it came where I was on the other side of it. And was like, is it Black or is it African American? How do you deal with certain things? And I felt like I kind of needed to be this resident expert on all things progressive or, marginalized groups that all of a sudden I shelled up and didn't ask. And it was so cowardly, but for the first time I understood that's what it feels like to ask me a question. Like, I can think I'm as an open book as I want.
Right.
But we have to stop people. We have to relieve people of the pressure of being ashamed that they don't know the answers, and that doesn't make them a bad person.
No, and have the hard conversation.
Yeah.
And you talk about the unapologetic, so having the patience, but the unapologetic piece, I just love because there is that piece of just freaking own it. Own it. It's okay. Because if you don't, like you said, you're coward, you don't have that courage.
Right.
You're still holding on to that shame, right?
And I think that there's a difference, unapologetic, you don't give the bird to the world and be like, this is me, take me as I am. Like, I lied to a lot of people. And so and I say it in the talk, you apologize for what you've done for sure. I wasn't the friend I should have been. I wasn't I have this, all of my relationships are based on trust and love and all of these amazing things. And I did not value them as I should. And we can justify it a thousand ways, but I had to apologize to the people.
It was your choice during that time. Yes.
For sure. But I would never apologize for being gay.
Right.
You know what I mean? I would apologize for lying to people about it. I would apologize for not believing that they could handle it. For sure. I would apologize for the way that I acted, but never for who I was, or the decision I made, or for my truth, whatever that might have been. I would never apologize for who I was. And I think that's you can't just write it off. You have to take responsibility for you have to take responsibility for that anger that you have and the way you react to people. But that isn't apologizing for the abuse.
What happened. Right.
Exactly. That's apologizing for how you handled it in that moment. And if you think that that's important, and those two things, you can do one and not do the other. You can stand strong to who you are, and people that expect you to apologize for who you are, that's a tougher conversation, and holding true to that. It's like going to your parents and I'm really sorry that I'm gay. I know it's disappointing to you. That's a tough road. I know you had different expectations for my life, and this is what it's going to look like now. And if you have questions, I want to keep talking to you about it, but I won't apologize for who I am, for for finding that out and living my life as truthfully and authentically as I can. I think that there's, that's kind of your power source
Yes.
in it. And sometimes people want to hear that, and they're going to have to hear it from somebody else, I guess.
So what are the reactions to when you go speak to especially like students and younger people about this? Because I know that's who you speak to a lot. College, high school, right?
Yeah, it depends, like we talked about earlier, geographically, it depends, kind of on where you are and how fierce the battles are and kind of support network people have in place. There's something I think really empowering for having students see somebody that that looks like them as they identify, that's gender nonconforming, that's all these things. And it's, no offense to the guys, but like, it's not a straight white guy. A straight middle-aged white guy talking about leadership. Like, I get it, and I know there's people that are good at it, but like to see somebody that looks like you and that your university is putting forward and bringing in and putting forth the effort to bring in somebody that you relate to, I think is really empowering. I think that we have some really interesting conversations, like you said. I mean, the conversations about gender and sexuality and fluidity in it is just so different than it used to be. And part of it, and I think, if you want to have a conversation about why you need gender-neutral bathrooms in a dorm, like, don't ask the 42-year-old lesbian. You know what I mean? Like, I still have, like, Melissa Etheridge, like, cassette tapes in my car. Like, I'm not that person for you.
Right.
Talk to the kid. Talk to a 16-year-old kid. Talk to a 20-year-old kid. Like, they will tell you why, but you have to be willing to listen. And so many times, people, middle-aged folks, are in these positions of authority, and you're looked to because you're gay, and so you're on the spectrum, so then you should have all the answers. But, that fluidity is hard for us to take, too. When you came out, and that was something that was so significant about coming out, that you were like, this is the life, for me, if you were gay, this is the life you signed up for. You were going to be in, like, 5 softball leagues. You were going to wear flannel, which I'm wearing right now, which is kind of ironic. You're going to have, like, 6 cats, and that's it. Like, that's
your life. That's it, yeah.
Like there was no Ellen, there was no, gay characters having families on, network TV, none of that stuff. Right. So that's what you signed up for. So you made this very definitive decision when you came out, and now it's just so different. And the kids and I feel like, 18 to 25-year-olds right now, like, they want that fluidity. They want that room. They're growing up with kids that are out in high school. That is like unheard of.
Right.
But that when I grew up, that just wasn't the case. And there were plenty of us that you go through Facebook now and you're like, oh, okay, bye, okay. It's like, hey, where were you?
Where were you?
Like,
yeah, right.
I was the same kid, So you look back and you're like, I knew. But I know people said that about me too. But anyway, you have this, like, we have this vision of like, and so it's so critical to go. I feel so, I like to kind of share these stories again in the same way and give people permission to share theirs in the hopes that they can create this more empathetic community or campus based on, say, this is what it's like to be me. And I don't know what it's like to be a lot of things, but when people share those stories with me, I can have an eye out for that. I can pay attention when those things happen, when those, I always say that there's something that everybody does every day that is the hardest thing that they do. And for 95% of the world, they don't even think twice about it. It is like not even on their screen. And when we share those challenges, then we can pay attention. Like, I don't know what it's like to walk in a store and be the only person the security guard follows because I'm the only woman of color in my group of friends.
I agree.
But now that I know it happens, I lose my mind when it does.
Yes.
It's important that we stand up, but we have to know what we're standing up for.
I completely agree.
So I think that and I keep going back, especially recently with everything going on, to this Martin Luther King quote that just keeps resonating with me lately. And it says, in the end, we will not remember the words of our enemies, but rather the silence of our friends. And it's so critical to not be quiet and to give ourselves permission to be those allies. And, I am white. Can I talk about race? Yeah, absolutely. But I need to do it in a very empathetic way. We need to have those conversations in the same way that, like, I need people to be a straight ally. There's never going to be enough gay people. No matter how hard we try, it's not going to happen. So we have to be able to have people that are willing to stand up for us, not because they're gay, but because it's the right thing to do. and that deals with race, that deals with the refugee crisis, with everything else. Like, we need to find that moral compass and figure out a way to follow it and not be afraid to say what we have to say. Again, even if it's not perfect.
I agree. I agree with the not perfect, and I definitely agree with, I feel like I'm terrified to speak my truth. That's why I started Women for One, so that I can, we do what we need to learn, right? So I'm out there, and every day I'm dipping my toe even more and more and stating my opinion. That doesn't mean I'm not scared to do it, and I'm not scared to be attacked. Even, and I'm not gay. It's just even just stating an opinion and getting bombarded with angry messages about it, which I've had happen. Right. It's terrifying to a lot of people. So, but I think just those small steps, because then it'll help us understand each other better and give us an awareness.
And that anxiety, for me at least, that anxiety we have about speaking up, it goes down every time we have that conversation. Yeah, every time we stumble through it and say it the wrong way, or we get corrected, or we whatever. Like, people that have a hard time saying partner, or putting significant others on the email that goes out to the company picnic, like whatever that is, every time you do it, it becomes easier. Every time you use the words in the conversations, you are more comfortable doing it, and it leads you to do it more often. You just have to start talking and give yourself permission, to not be the executive director of, the HRC. Like, that's not your world, but that's where everybody is. Like, everyone, everybody in any group of people, like, everybody is somebody's student. You always have something to learn, but so many people that are coming in as allies, or as, people that are speaking out against, sexual abuse, even if it hasn't happened to them, like whoever that is, everyone is also someone's guru. Like, when I go to talks and there are, people that I think wouldn't typically be the folks that would be in the room, there's somebody that wanted to be there that couldn't.
Right.
And so the person that was there of that demographic is then that person's expert. Like, we have to be able to take our power in what we know and know that people look to us for guidance. That's just how it is, as opposed to being, well, I don't know enough, so I probably shouldn't say anything. It makes you so much more approachable when you're real. When the straight people in the office come to your cubicle and be like, I don't really know what Ash calls her girlfriend. Is it her wife? Is it her partner? Right. Is it her, like, how does she say that? It's really intimidating to say that to me because it's personal. But to go to my, like, straight ally who's had that conversation, it's just, you're just a more approachable person, and you're going to be in, I'm never going to be in, like, the fraternity house meeting.
Right.
But we need people there to stand up for what's right. Like, we sometimes you get to pick your allies, and sometimes your allies pick you, and to blow people off because they aren't as developed or educated in the cause when they're just trying is a miscarriage of what we're trying to do. We can't be inclusive as we tend to be by being exclusive to people that don't know as much as we do. It's just crazy.
I completely agree. It's a great way to end on the wisdom piece of this, where you talk about MLK and his quote. And what can you say, your wisdom, your quote that you always say?
God,
about conversation.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
I like to hear it from the real deal, not me saying it.
All closet is the hard conversation.
Yeah. And if we just speak up.
Absolutely, and we're all doing it, and it's so enlightening to hear somebody else's story, and when you're out there, you make yourself so much more open to hear other people's stories and to engage in that level. And everybody that's out there sharing their story is inspiring people they don't even know. I mean, obviously Women for One, with all those stories that are shared and the people that are doing it, and kind of the, like, safety and anonymity of the internet, like, it is, you cannot even count the number of people you're influencing just by sharing your story. And it's never about clicks or views. If there's one person that relates to it, you've changed somebody's life. And what else can you want by, beyond sharing your story? Because if you've changed yours, if you're sharing it, and that's enough. And there'll be one more person, I promise.
Yeah, what else is there? It's supporting one another. So how can people get in touch with you, Ash?
So you can go to, I'm on social media, Facebook and Twitter. Instagram is at the Ash Beckham. Everything else is Ash Beckham. I've got a website. Usually on the Facebook page is where I post where I'm going. It's probably not till the first of the year. where I'm heading out anywhere else. But that's it. And then there's more videos and links and stuff like that on my website, ashbeckham.com.
Great. Well, it was so awesome to talk to you, and thank you so much for speaking
It
to
was
me.
so great. I love it. I appreciate you. Thanks so much for everything you're
Thanks
doing.
for everything you're doing. All right, see you guys later.